Hello, and welcome back to Graham Talks Politics. I'm your host, Graham Rebick. I know it's been a long time, but I'm finally back and ready to start producing season 3 because so much is going on. If you feel like a political landscape just underwent a 7.0 magnitude earthquake, you're not imagining it. Friday afternoon, the Supreme Court handed down a ruling that didn't just tweak the status quo. It fundamentally challenged how the executive branch has been doing business for the last year. Now, before we dive into the big topics, let's take a step back and set the stage. The energy in Washington right now is electric. Every major outlet from the Wall Street Journal to Politico has been running non-stop coverage of this ruling. And the chatter in the halls of Congress feels different. Staffers are whispering, lobbyists are circling, and reporters are digging for the next angle. We're going deep today. We're breaking down the tariff tumble and why the Supreme Court just clipped the administration's wings. We're looking at the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE's, wild new plan to gamify the federal workforce. And we're looking abroad at the nuclear void left by the expiration of the New START treaty. I know it's a lot to process, but don't worry. We've got the data, the legal context, and most importantly, the so what for your weekend. Grab your coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. Before we start, though, a quick note. If you're new to the show, this is where we break big stories into digestible pieces. We're going to spend time on the background, the players involved, and the ripple effects. So by the end of the episode, you're feeling like you could brief your friends or even challenge your local political pundit on what's really going on. Segment 1, the SCOTUS Tariff Bombshell. Let's start with the headline that's currently rattling every supply chain manager in the country. For the last 13 months, the administration has relied on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to levy aggressive tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. The White House has framed this as a national security necessity. But Friday, in a 6-3 ruling in the case Trade Federation v. United States, the Supreme Court said, not so fast. Let's get into the legal breakdown. So basically, Chief Justice Roberts, writing for the majority, invoked the major questions doctrine. Essentially, he said that the court ruled that the president can't use a 1970s era emergency law to permanently rewrite the nation's trade policy without explicit permission from Congress. The impacts of this ruling are that this effectively freezes the collection of billions of dollars in duties. There's now a massive question mark over whether the $250 billion already collected will have to be refunded to importers. The administration's Plan B. So, within 2 hours of the ruling, the president signed an executive order invoking Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. This is a narrower authority that allows for a 15% balance of payments tariff for 150 days. Legally speaking, this is a game of chess. The court knocked down the unlimited version of the tariffs, so the White House just switched to a temporary version to keep the leverage alive. For you and me, this means the prices at the store are going to stay more or less the same and still be volatile. Well, let's pause here and really think about that. Tariffs sounds like this distant, abstract policy, but they hit you on the grocery aisle and at the electronics store. So you really should know a little bit about them. If you've noticed prices bouncing around this last year, tariffs are part of why. Retailers hate uncertainty. And right now, uncertainty is the only thing on the menu. So they be switching those prices up all the time. Segment 2: DOGE and the incentivized state. Moving from the courts to the bureaucracy, the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, released its Phase 3 report this week. And honestly, it's something out of a Silicon Valley pitch deck. They're calling it the Federal Efficiency Gamification Initiative, or FEGI. What's in this whole plan? So basically, it consists of performance ledgers, crypto incentives, and the sunset rule, as they're calling it. Performance ledgers basically mean that every federal employee, from IRS agents to park rangers, are going to have a public facing productivity score. Crypto incentives mean that DOGE is proposing that typical year end bonuses would be paid out in government backed digital assets for cost saving measures. And finally, the sunset rule. What does this mean? Basically, this is just a system they want to implement where any agency that's not meeting a 10% efficiency gain year over year faces an automatic budget haircut. On paper, it sounds like running the government like a business. In reality, this is causing a massive brain drain. We're seeing record high retirement numbers in the EPA and the Department of Education. The administration sees this as trimming the fat, but critics are worried we're losing the institutional knowledge required to, actually run a country. I spent some time looking at internal memos, and here's the thing: morale is low. Workers feel like they're being graded by a scoreboard that doesn't capture the nuance of their jobs. So rather than staying and being graded by this said scoreboard, they're just leaving, they're retiring. I even heard something a park ranger said, and he said it feels like I'm playing a game I didn't sign up for, which is the truth. And wouldn't that be annoying? I want y'all to just think on what this means for the government, because I don't want to get into that today. Well, let's get into segment 3, though: the 2026 midterm fever. We're 9 months out from the 2026 midterms, and the polling data is starting to look, well, complicated. Here's the key metrics. According to the latest YouGov data, Democrats hold a 7.5-point lead. Historically speaking, that's wave election territory. There's one interesting metric that's affecting younger voters. And this would be the housing factor. For voters under 35, the number one issue isn't the border or woke wars, it's housing affordability. 72% of respondents say that neither party has a viable plan to lower rents or mortgage rates. And this is going to play a huge, huge role in the outcome of the midterms. And finally, there's some ethics concerns that will have a huge impact on the midterms. There's this growing quiet middle of independent voters who are citing the president's ties to World Liberty Financial, a crypto platform, as a major concern. I think that the president should probably address this because if he doesn't, it's going to end badly for him, as we'll see during the midterms. Anyways, that's about all. I do think, though, that you should keep an eye on special elections in Ohio and Florida because those races are likely going to be the first tremors before the political earthquake. Segment 4: The Nuclear Void. Finally, the world outside our borders. While we were focused on the SCOTUS ruling, the New START Treaty officially expired on February 5th. What does this mean? This just means that for the first time in over 50 years, there's no limits on the number of nuclear warheads for the US and Russia to deploy. There's no inspectors, no data exchanges, and no hotlines. Really, this could be the start of a new era of brinkmanship. Or we might see an opportunity for fresh treaties. But history tells us that once the guardrails come off, it's hard to put them back. Closing the week's outlook. So, what's the takeaway for your Wednesday morning? We are living through the stress of the American system. The courts are pushing back, the bureaucracy is experimenting, and the world stage is shifting into unpredictable territory. Remember, the very fact that these debates exist means the system is still working. It might be really messy and it might be slightly dysfunctional, but it's still working. And that is where all of my optimism these days roots from. So keep that in the back of your mind as things continue to get more and more difficult. Here's some next steps for you. You need to watch the Treasury yields next week. It's important. Just check it out. I'm not going to explain. And also, you need to check on your voter registration because the midterms are coming up closer than you may think they are, and they're really important. They're the only way that you're going to get a say in what happens in the next 3 years of this presidency. So you best go vote. Anyways, that's all for today. I'm Graham Rebeck. This has been Graham Talks Politics. Stay sharp, stay informed, and I'll see you back here next Tuesday.